The final episode of Tom Brady's docuseries, The Man in the Arena, has finally come out. It is, remember, it was delayed. The first 9 episodes came out, and then there was a long delay on the 10th and final episode. We now have episode 10. It's called The Wheel. And it tells the story of Tom Brady making the move to Tampa, leaving New England, going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, winning a Super Bowl there in his very first year in Tampa during the COVID year. And first of all, let's acknowledge something. I think this is very important to say. I don't care who you are. I don't care how much you hate Tom Brady or love Tom Brady. It's always going to be impressive to me, and I think it's objectively impressive. Whether you hate him or love him, you have to acknowledge the fact that he went to Tampa and in year 1 found a way to win a Super Bowl. I don't know how you aren't impressed by that. That's just really, really, really cool. And he kind of defied all odds. I remember when he went to Tampa, how negative the narrative was. He fell off a cliff. He's a terrible football player. I did a film analysis, remember, saying, hey, he's really good. He needs good receivers. I will always be very, very proud of that video. That was one of the most right I've ever been in the history of the career of this show, where I'm like, I believe something. I know I'm right. And I was right. And I'm really proud of that. And especially during the early part of that 2020 regular season, Tom Brady's first year in Tampa, nobody believed it was going to work. Even me, like as a person who thought Tom Brady was good, I still thought, hey, he's a good quarterback, but it's not working in Tampa. I remember feeling like things are ugly here. They were like 7-5 at the bye week, and they were a wild card team that went on to win the Super Bowl. And it's just, the point here is that no matter what angle you're coming from, you have to be impressed that Tom Brady found a way to win a Super Bowl in year 1 in Tampa. Now, I will say the beginning of this episode is really interesting. There's a couple good quotes at the end, but the majority, the meat and potatoes of this final episode of Man in the Arena, the middle section, the journey to the regular season, the stories they get on their way to a Super Bowl, it's absolutely boring. It wasn't interesting. I thought it was the worst episode of the series by far, actually. It's just Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski kind of just talking about a few of the highlighted moments from that season. Hey, remember when we played Drew Brees? Remember when we played Aaron Rodgers? Remember when we beat Patrick Mahomes? I mean, hearing them talk about it, it felt like they just literally like, well, what are the 3 big storylines from this season? Give us a couple quotes about it. It felt, the word is obligatory. They're like, look, we got a contract. We got to do episode 10. Clearly something was going on behind the scenes in production where I would imagine Brady actually wasn't that excited to make this episode. Like, even if we don't really want to do this, but we have to because we got a contract. That's really how the episode felt for most of it. There wasn't any cool insight into anything that went on behind the scenes during that year. Like, the early episodes were, during the Patriots seasons where he comes out of nowhere from Michigan, wins a first Super Bowl, wins another one. We heard stories about Lawyer Malloy and Drew Bledsoe and like stuff I'd never heard of before. I'm like, wow, that's really cool insight. We didn't get that in this episode. And it makes sense when you do the math. You go, well, Tom Brady is still a member of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He probably isn't that excited to share some of the secrets from that part of his career because it's not over yet. And I wonder, like, how much of the production of this episode particularly was kind of tortured by the fact that Brady retired and unretired and was thinking about going to Miami, and then he stayed. And it felt like the end result we got was a highly edited, watered-down version of everything that Tom Brady has to say about it, because I think Tom is still in the middle of it and doesn't really want to share a lot about it. He doesn't want to create a distraction. Tom also did give a quote, and maybe this is it too. Like, I'm sure it's a little bit of both. Tom said it's easier to look back 20 years ago than 2 years ago because I have a lot of perspective on 20 years ago. I'm still gaining my perspective on the more recent memories. So it might just be that he doesn't have as much to say, literally, but I think a lot of it is he doesn't want to talk about things that are still ongoing and still in flux. And this is an episode I hyped up. I remember when the series started, I'm like, I can't wait to hear him talk about leaving New England and going to Tampa. But unfortunately, the result wasn't the thing I was excited for this entire time. Again, though, the beginning and end of this episode were pretty interesting. Particularly the beginning when Tom Brady is talking about his dad and also talking about the process of choosing New England. Brady said, I guess it was really his dad who said this, but Brady also alluded to it, that he needed to make a change to be happy. And he said the pain of losing in New England had far surpassed the joy of winning. And winning in New England became a relief rather than something to be excited and celebrate and have joy about. That's kind of sad when I get it though. The pressure built up, Tom Brady, the dynasty. I think that bled into the enjoyment of the game, and going to Tampa, having a fresh start in the warm weather, in a new city, learning new stuff and new people and building new relationships. I think all of that really, really reinvigorated Tom Brady and helped him remain in love with the game. And he also talked about, simplifying his life, which is interesting to me, how he cut a lot of stuff out and simplifying it made it easier to find joy. And it was interesting when he said that there are 3 aspects of being the best he can be. Everyone knows about the physical side of the game and the mental side of the game. But the third thing that is often overlooked, and it's not just in sports, it's in everything, is we often overlook emotional well-being. And he felt like he couldn't be his best self if he wasn't caring for his emotional well-being. And that was interesting, I think helpful for a lot of people out there. We talk about your mind and your body, but remember your emotions and how you feel about stuff and how you feel about your place in life really, really has an impact on how you're doing. And then Tom Brady talked about his dad, and he described his father as present and unselfish, and talked about how, Tom Brady felt like his dad invested a lot in him and really helped him a lot get to where he was as a quarterback. Didn't push him, but was encouraging and was there for him when he needed rides or needed someone to play catch with, or his dad was just his ally along the way. And that's pretty cool to hear. And then, Tom Brady Sr., his father, Tom Brady Jr. and then Tom Brady Sr., the dad, Tom Brady's dad, Tom Brady Sr., repeated a quote that I love. He said, "Tough times don't last, but tough people do." One more time. Tough times don't last. Tough people do. And that's encouragement that I feel like I needed to hear. I was like, oh, wow, I love that. And that's not the first time Tom Brady Sr. has said that during the series, but right now, in this point in my life, I love that quote. I'm like, okay, we're going to get through it. Just keep fighting and you're going to be okay. Now, it was not my favorite episode of this series, like literally at all. Although Tom did give an interesting quote at the end that I think gives us a little bit more insight into who Tom is as a person and as a dad. And he gave a quote, first of all, saying that he does not believe he's as good a dad as his father was to him. Interesting. And then he followed that quote up by saying, Tom said this. He said, "I hope my kids find something they love like I did. But I hope they don't take it as far as me. There are imbalances in my life." And there's a lot of subtle pain in that statement. You ever heard the quote? My dad has said this quote to me a lot in life. He says, when you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to something else. You can't do everything. You only have so much time, and it's how you budget your time. And Tom Brady has budgeted most of his life. He spent most of his life in pursuit of becoming the best football player he could possibly be. And I felt a small twinge of regret there. Like, I chose not to invest in other things in my life. I chose this path. I'm committed to it. I'm in too deep now. But it's really the first time I've ever heard Tom Brady say anything negative about his commitment to football. And I'm like, there is way more to that we're not unpacking. And I was like, That's very interesting. Especially on the back of Tom Brady retiring and then unretiring. You're like, well, this guy really is wrestling with his success and wrestling with not just football, but everything in his life and everything, his commitments and what he's doing. And I find that really, really interesting about Tom Brady. And I did not expect to find that weird gem of a quote during episode 10 of Man in the Arena. It's highly edited. It's basically, what's the word? Propaganda for Tom Brady. Like, this series is edited by him. He's got full creative control. He's not going to say anything negative at all, especially this episode in particular, because he's not going to badmouth Tampa or say anything bad about New England. But actually, this episode really made me hungry for more. Maybe someday when he's fully retired and actually done with football, we'll get some kind of storytelling medium where Tom Brady can really share not only all the good, but maybe hopefully someday some of the bad of this journey on his way to becoming, I would argue, the greatest quarterback of all time.